The villagers gathered under the ancient Irako tree, their faces twisted in shock and laughter, as the 7 pregnant furious women stood before the council, bellies round and arms akimbo. They pointed accusing fingers at the man in question, Baba Nyanga, the self-proclaimed spiritual warrior and expert in chasing away spiritual husbands, but ended up impregnating 7 of them. This was no ordinary council meeting, this was a scandal that would be retold for generations. Before Baba Nyanga became a self-styled mystic, he was just Nyanga, a man with a knack for ridiculous schemes that almost always ended in disaster. He had tried his hand at every job imaginable in the village and failed miserably at each one. His first venture was as a professional rain summoner. Armed with a battered drum and a loincloth adorned with cowrie shells, Nyanga charged villagers a fee to summon rain during the dry season. For days, he danced and chanted under the blazing sun, but when not even a single drop of rain fell, the villagers chased him off with curses and laughter. Undeterred, Nyanga reinvented himself as a goat whisperer, claiming he could teach goats to obey human commands. He convinced the village butcher to lend him a particularly stubborn goat named Amina, promising to train her to fetch water from the stream. After 2 weeks of being dragged through the mud and nearly losing an eye to Amina's sharp horns, Nyanga declared the goat possessed and abandoned the profession altogether. By then, word had spread, and the nickname Nyanga the Goat Fool stuck like palm oil on white fabric. His next career move was perhaps his most audacious, selling magic stones that could supposedly ward off evil spirits. He had collected ordinary river rocks, polished them until they shone, and sold them for exorbitant prices. The scheme worked until one particularly skeptical customer threw a stone at a supposed evil spirit, a harmless stray dog, only to watch the dog wag its tail and follow him home. Once again, Nyanga found himself fleeing an angry mob, this time with a sack of unsold stones bouncing on his back. After the string of humiliating failures, Nyanga disappeared for several months. When he returned, he rebranded himself as Baba Nyanga, a spiritual warrior with divine powers. He wore a flowing robe made of patched-up fabric, adorned himself with beads, and carried a staff carved with intricate designs, which he had actually bought from a traveling merchant. To complete his transformation, he moved into a hut on the outskirts of the village, decorating it with feathers, bones, and bottles filled with murky liquids. Nyanga claimed he had spent his time in the sacred mountains communing with the spirits. "They have blessed me with visions and powers beyond human comprehension," he declared to the villagers. Though many were skeptical, desperation often trumped common sense, and the women in the village soon began seeking his help for their woes. Baba Nyanga's reputation as a mystic spread like wildfire through the village. His hut was adorned with feathers, bones, and bottles filled with murky liquids, giving an aura of supernatural authority. Women flocked to him, desperate for solutions to their inexplicable woes. They believed he had the power to banish the spiritual husbands, malevolent spirits said to bind women, causing infertility, bad luck, and failed relationships. He would whisper gravely, "The spiritual husband is jealous. That's why you cannot find a husband of your own. But fear not, my power is great. I can chase him away with my sacred spiritual liquid." The women, desperate and gullible, hung on his every word. But Baba Nyanga was no mystic. His powers were nothing more than charm, quick wit, and a disturbingly creative imagination. His solution? He claimed that when he shared his essence with them, the spiritual husband would flee in fear. He spun elaborate tales of how his divine seed was an antidote to the curse, and to make it more convincing, he charged a hefty fee for his services. "The spirits demand sacrifice," he would explain. "Bring me 3 goats, a tub of honey, and 12 cowries. Only then can the process begin." Most of the women, desperate for relief, would scrape together the payment, believing it was a small price to pay for freedom from the spiritual bondage. Ada, a shy but curious young woman, was among the first to fall for his scheme. She had spent years blaming her misfortunes on a spiritual husband. When she visited Baba Nyanga, he had lit a fire and thrown mysterious powders into it, creating a burst of smoke. "The spirits have spoken," he announced solemnly. "Your spiritual husband is very powerful. Only my liquid can overpower him." After paying him the required fee, a goat and her grandmother's treasured gold bangle, she reluctantly followed him into his sacred chamber. There, Baba Nyanga had her chant nonsensical phrases like, "O great hunter of spirits," chase them away, while he performed his ritual. Then there was Ajiro, who came to him with a live chicken and a bottle of palm wine as instructed. Baba Nyanga sighed theatrically and said, "The spirits have changed their demands. They now require a deeper connection through me." Ajiro, already feeling guilty about the failed marriage proposals in her life, believed him. During the process, Baba Nyanga convinced her to scream, "I banish you, spirit of the waters," at the top of her lungs, all while he performed his fraudulent eradication ritual. Bimbo, the third victim, had a sharper tongue. When Baba Nyanga suggested his absurd solution, she burst out laughing. "You mean to tell me the spirits are scared of you? You don't even have shoes, Baba Nyanga." But after he waved his hands dramatically, threw some ground pepper into the air, and muttered gibberish, she grew nervous. He told her that her spiritual husband had already tied her future husband to a tree in the spirit realm and that only Baba Nyanga could untie him. She eventually handed over her last bag of yam flour and agreed to the ritual. During their session, Baba Nyanga made her recite, "Tie him no more, O spirits," over and over, claiming the spirits feared those words. Bimbo later admitted she felt ridiculous but was too afraid to stop. Nkechi's story was even more absurd. Baba Nyanga convinced her that the spirits required her to bring him fresh fish every day for 7 days before the ritual. By the time that eradication occurred, he had feasted on a week's worth of catfish stew at her expense. When she questioned his methods during the act, he scolded her, saying, "You must not interrupt the flow of spiritual energy. Now repeat after me, chase him, spirits of the dark." One of the most gullible of the group was Fatima, who not only handed over her family's prize goat but also a jar of shea butter that her late mother had given her. Baba Nyanga told her she was cursed by 2 spiritual husbands. "They are competing for you," he said, shaking his head dramatically. "Only a double dose of my essence will free you." During their encounter, he made her chant, "Double the power, double the escape." By the time the 7th woman's story emerged, the pattern was undeniable. Baba Nyanga wasn't chasing away spiritual husbands, he was chasing skirts and bankrolling his lifestyle with their desperation. The twist came when the women started comparing notes. At first, they were embarrassed, but as their anger grew, so did their resolve. They marched together to the elders, united in their outrage. The village chief, a man with a booming voice and a penchant for theatrics, banged his staff on the ground. "Baba Nyanga, you have deceived these women, brought shame to our village, and insulted the spirits. What do you have to say for yourself?" Baba Nyanga, cornered and sweating, tried to maintain his mystic facade. "The spirits work in mysterious ways, chief. Perhaps their pregnancies are a sign of the spiritual husbands fleeing." The chief was unimpressed. "Fleeing? Or you are just a cunning man with a dangerous appetite?" The council deliberated for hours, but the women were clear, Baba Nyanga must face justice. The verdict? He would marry all 7 women and take responsibility for the children he fathered. The announcement sent the crowd into uproarious laughter. Baba Nyanga's face fell as he realized the enormity of his punishment. 7 wives meant 7 sets of responsibilities, 7 households to manage, and 7 angry women to answer to. The wedding day was a spectacle. The women, dressed in their finest, were matching expressions of victory. Baba Nyanga, meanwhile, looked like a goat being led to slaughter. The village musicians played an ironic tune, and the crowd cheered as he reluctantly said, "I do," 7 times. Life after the wedding was far from magical. Baba Nyanga's hut became a chaotic circus, with the 7 wives banding together to ensure he never attempted another scam. The women's bond grew stronger as they co-parented their children and swapped stories about their husbands' antics. But one fateful night, months after the weddings, Baba Nyanga disappeared. The wives woke to find his side of the mat cold and his belongings gone. The villagers searched high and low but found no trace of him. Some said he had run off to another village to start fresh, others believed the spirits he mocked had finally claimed him. What made his disappearance even more suspicious was a note left behind, written in his messy scrawl. It read, "The spirits have called me to a higher purpose. Farewell." The wives were skeptical. Higher purpose? Eijiro scoffed. He probably found another gullible village to exploit. The villagers tried to move on, but stories of Baba Nyanga's antics became more elaborate with each retelling. Some said he had turned into a bird and flown away. Others claimed he had been swallowed whole by the earth in retribution for his lies. Months after Baba Nyanga's mysterious disappearance, life in the village had begun to settle into an uneasy normalcy. The 7 wives, now a tightly knit sisterhood, were thriving in ways no one had expected. Their cooperative was a roaring success. They pooled their resources to start a thriving trade in palm oil, yams, and handcrafted wares. Together, they had transformed Baba Nyanga's shabby hut into a vibrant community hub. But trouble wasn't far behind. One fateful market day, Ada overheard whispers about a new mystic in the neighboring town of Abulegba. His name? Baba Mysterious. The description sent chills down her spine, a tall man with a patch-up robe, adorned with beads, and carrying a carved staff. Ada didn't need further confirmation. Baba Nyanga had resurfaced. The women's plan. Ada wasted no time gathering her co-wives. They met under the Irako tree, their laughter giving way to serious expressions. "He's at it again," Ada began. "The fool hasn't learned his lesson." Bimbo, ever the strategist, smirked. "Let's teach him a lesson he won't forget this time. We've been through enough to know how to handle him." The women devised a daring plan. They would travel to Abulegba, expose Baba Nyanga, and put an end to his schemes once and for all. But this time, they wouldn't go as helpless victims, they would go as avengers, armed with wit, courage, and a few tricks of their own. The journey to Abulegba. The journey was no small feat. The women, accompanied by Ada's young son, Toby, who insisted on coming along to protect his mothers, traveled through dense forests and bustling markets. Along the way, they encountered colorful characters, including a traveling bard who insisted on joining their mission after hearing their tale. By the time they arrived in Abulegba, they had gathered a small entourage of curious travelers eager to see how the drama would unfold. Abulegba was abuzz with Baba Mysterious's latest miracle. He had allegedly cured a woman of her infertility by having her drink a concoction of palm wine and crushed cola nuts. The women found him in the marketplace, surrounded by a crowd. He was mid-speech, dramatically waving his staff. "Behold, the spirits speak through me. They have shown me visions of your curses, and only I can." Baba Nyanga. Eijiro's voice rang out, silencing the crowd. The mystic froze, his eyes wide as he spotted his 7 wives. Their presence was like a ghost from his past, 7 very angry ghosts. "You didn't tell your new audience about us, did you?" Bimbo added, her tone dripping with sarcasm. The crowd murmured, eyes darting between the women and Baba Nyanga. "These are my, assistants." Baba Nyanga stammered, sweat dripping down his forehead. "Assistants?" Fatima laughed, stepping forward. "You mean the 7 women you swindled, impregnated, and abandoned?" The crowd gasped, and murmurs turned into accusations. What followed was a masterclass in poetic justice. The wives revealed Baba Nyanga's schemes, recounting their tales with dramatic flair. Ada, now a skilled storyteller, had the crowd hanging on her every word. By the time they were done, the crowd had turned against Baba Nyanga. The village chief of Abulayagba, a stern woman named Ayabo, demanded he face punishment. But the women weren't done yet. They had brought a sack of magic stones and other relics from Baba Nyanga's previous scams. Bimbo stepped forward with one of his old polished river rocks. "This," she declared, "is Baba Nyanga's sacred tool for banishing spiritual husbands. Let's see how it works on him." With that, she tossed the stone at Baba Nyanga's feet. The crowd erupted into laughter. The final twist. Just as Ayabo was about to pass judgment, a commotion erupted at the edge of the crowd. A group of women from another village had arrived, each holding evidence of Baba Nyanga's deceit. Among them was a woman with a newborn baby, claiming Baba Nyanga had promised her the child was spiritually blessed. Faced with overwhelming evidence and a furious mob, Baba Nyanga dropped his staff and tried to flee. But Toby, the young boy who had insisted on coming, tripped him with a well-placed stick. "You're not going anywhere, Baba," Toby declared, to the delight of the crowd. Baba Nyanga was sentenced to hard labor, working in the fields to repay every cowrie he had taken. The wives, now celebrated as heroes, returned to their village with tales of their triumph. Ada's storytelling grew even more popular, drawing crowds from neighboring villages. Ajiro opened a small business selling herbal remedies, real ones this time, and Bimbo became an advisor to the village council, ensuring no one else fell for such scams. As for Baba Nyanga, his legend continued to grow, but not in the way he had hoped. Parents told their children bedtime stories about him, not as a hero, but as a cautionary tale of greed and deceit. And so, the story of Baba Nyanga, the self-proclaimed spiritual warrior, lived on as a lesson in wit, resilience, and the power of community. Back in the village, the story of Baba Nyanga evolved into a full-blown folktale, complete with exaggerated details about his supposed powers and his eventual downfall. Parents would tell their children, if a man offers to solve your problems with strange rituals, remember Baba Nyanga and think twice. The wives, now thriving matriarchs of their community, took pride in their role in exposing the fraud. They often gathered under the Irako tree to share memories and laugh about the man who had tried to deceive them.
Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey. If Baba Nyanga's story inspired you, made you laugh, or opened your eyes to the power of unity and truth, don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more captivating stories. Let's keep spreading messages of empowerment and resilience. Turn on the notification bell so you won't miss our next story. Until next time, stay inspired. Like and subscribe. Thank you.